Alright, so picture this. I was driving home from work the other day, right? Blasting Bohemian Rhapsody because someone I work with has a Freddie Mercury mustache and behind his back of course, since he gets paid significantly more than I do, call him Scaramouche Scaramouche. Anyway, that song ended and Come Together came on, and it got me thinking, why was Come Together the only Beatles song Michael Jackson ever recorded? Before we dive into Michael Jackson's version, we've got to go back to 1969 to the original, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, for what would have been a part of the Beatles' final recorded album, Abbey Road. Although Let It Be was technically recorded first, but released later in 1970. Don't come for me, Beatles stans. As a he, please go easy on me, he.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
In 1969, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown, and the Beatles broke up. Okay, I know they didn't publicly break up until like April of 1970 when Paul McCartney put out a press release, but it's been said they had disbanded in private in September 1969 when John Lennon stated he was leaving the group. The Beatles breakup would become one of the many reasons the girls, Lennon and McCartney, were fighting, as I like to say. But I digress. Come Together actually started as a campaign song for psychologist and LSD advocate Timothy Leary, who was planning to run for governor of California against Ronald Reagan. His campaign slogan, Come Together, Join the Party. But the gag is, back in 1968, Leary was convicted of marijuana possession and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Then, in 1969, while he was out on bail pending appeal, he announced his plans to run in the 1970 election. When his appeal failed, he was locked up, effectively ending his political campaign before it even started. Don't do drugs, kids. John Lennon was then left with the title Come Together and took that into the recording sessions of Abbey Road. To quote Michael Jackson, all the songs, the history behind every track. So Lennon reworked everything that he'd put into the campaign song, which he wrote with George Harrison, and Come Together was the result. The song opened Abbey Road, the last album of the Beatles, which was released in September 1969. The lyrics gave significant airtime to the nonsense speak so dear to John Lennon, and promoted a unifying theme. One thing I can tell you is you got to be free. Come together, right now, over me. It's important to note that elements of Come Together were inspired by rock and roll legend Chuck Berry's 1956 single, You Can't Catch Me. Sonically, the two tracks share a similar groove, and Lennon directly reworked lyrics from Berry's song, like, Here comes a flat top, he was moving up on me, versus He come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly. Chuck Berry was one of John Lennon's biggest inspirations. He even once said if you tried to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry. However, that didn't stop Morris Levy, owner of Big 7 Music, the publisher of You Can't Catch Me, from demanding a check for plagiarism. The two settled out of court in 1973, with Lennon agreeing to record 3 songs owned by Levy, including You Can't Catch Me. But then, basically, what had happened was, Levy got greedy, bootlegged Lennon's rough mixes, and ended up getting sued right back in 1975. Lennon won, Levy lost, wigs were snatched, and scalps were bald. Now, in order for us to get to the part where MJ ultimately recorded Come Together, there's some tea we need to spill about how he met Paul McCartney and how he just did good business.
I just did good business, you know?
I mean, he bought the Beatles catalog. Let's rewind to the 1970s when Paul McCartney composed a song called Girlfriend, a track that would eventually land on Michael Jackson's first solo album away from his brothers, 1979's Off the Wall. To quote Michael Jackson, all the songs, the history behind every track, when Paul McCartney composed Girlfriend in 1974, he thought the Jackson 5 would be performing it. He gave it to Michael after an evening in Beverly Hills on June 24, 1976, and went so far as to sing the first few lines for him. This occasion marked the start of a great friendship between the leader of the Jacksons and the former Beatle. Interestingly, I also learned from this book that Girlfriend was originally supposed to be the album's title track, but thank God Rod Temperton stepped in and gave Michael Jackson the certified classic that became the real title track, Off the Wall. Anyway, since it wasn't used in 1974, Paul revisited the song in 1978 and recorded it with his group Wings on the album London Town. And this version, is kinda lacking something. Seasoning. Ain't got no Lori seasoned salt, no slap your mammy, just nothing, Jesus. To quote Man in the Music, The Creative Life and Work of Michael Jackson by Joseph Vogel, Jackson first mentioned the song in a 1977 interview. "I love Paul McCartney," he said at the time. "I've been to 2 of Paul's parties and we get together and talk. He wrote a song for me and I never got a chance to record it. Him and his wife Linda McCartney were telling me about it. It's called Girlfriend. They were singing it to me and they said they want to do it too. I remember him singing it. I'll never forget the melody. I could forget all kinds of things, but I never forget a melody." This would lead to the two working together on 3 songs: Thriller's The Girl Is Mine, Say, and The Man, which both ended up on Paul's album, Pipes of Peace. And personally, the only song I liked that they did together was Say. Now y'all know The Girl Is Mine is mid, and The Man wasn't that great either.
I said what I said!
When I quoted Joseph Vogel's book earlier, I mentioned that MJ and Paul would get together and talk, and one of the things they talk about was music publishing. Grab your teacups, because I'm about to spill the tea on when Michael Jackson purchased the Beatles catalog.
We've always been trying to sort of get control of them, really. So I suppose the only difference is that now, I suppose Michael knew I was trying to sort of get control of him, and I kind of thought he was joking. I used to work with him, and he'd say, "I'm going to get your records, you know. I'm going to get your songs. I'm going to buy your songs." And I'd say, "Love it." You know, I thought it was a joke. Anyway, he ended up doing that. So, I mean, I can't sort of blame him. You know, they're on the market.
You were the guy who said to Michael Jackson, "You should get into publishing."
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Don't you love the irony?
And he bought all your songs.
Yeah.
And you've said to him, "Listen, I'll give you fair market value. Let me buy my songs. I want to own them." And he won't do it.
No.
And now that he has
Scumbag.
Scumbag.
He's sort
And I thought he was joking. He said, "Oh, I'm going to get yours." Well, I went, "Oh, he slapped
Sure
him
you
on
are.
the back.
Right.
Good one." You know, I thought that was a joke. And then I just got rung up and said, "He's got yours." What I don't like is that I've actually written to him a couple of times with Dish in the Dirt. "How'd you got me at it?"
Go ahead.
And, you know, he said, "Oh, well, that's just business." I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And we've never talked about it. He won't even answer my letters.
I just did good business, you know?
Let me preface this by saying a lot of people in the MJ fandom and the Beatles fandom, please don't come for me, are very torn about whether it was right for MJ to buy the catalog, especially considering how close he was with Paul. And honestly, from a moral standpoint, it's a little shiesty, I can't even cap. But from a business standpoint, he did his big one, as the kids say. Though, I believe that decision to purchase the catalog changed the course of his life, for better and for worse. To quote Moonwalk by Michael Jackson, "Eventually, I would buy the ATV Music Publishing catalog, which included many of the great Lennon-McCartney songs. But most people don't know that it was Paul who introduced me to the idea of getting involved in music publishing. I was staying with Paul and Linda at their house in the country when Paul told me about his own involvement in music publishing. He handed me a little book with MPL printed on the cover. He smiled as I opened it because he knew I was going to find the contents exciting. It contained a list of all the songs Paul owns, and he'd been buying the rights to songs for a long time. I had never given the idea of buying songs any thought before. When the ATV Music Publishing catalog, which contains many Lennon-McCartney songs, went on sale, I decided to put in a bid. I consider myself a musician who is, incidentally, a businessman. In the early 80s, MJ started dipping his toe into buying song publishing rights, sticking to smaller catalogs and individual songs at first. He bought the rights to songs by Sly and the Family Stone, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, and sometimes he'd buy the catalogs of underpaid black artists from the labels and then give them back to the artists, many of whom never owned their masters in the first place. He wasn't just buying hits, he was restoring ownership to the very artists the industry tried to erase. That is a black king right there.
That's a black king right there. That's a black king right there. Give me that, give me that.
In August of 1985, with the help of his attorney, now co-executor of the MJ estate, John Branca, Michael Jackson purchased the ATV Music Publishing catalog for $47.5 million. To quote Making Michael, Inside the Career of Michael Jackson by Mike Smallcombe. That August, Michael also made a major business investment. 11 months earlier, he had been informed by John Branca that a major music publishing catalog, ATV Music Publishing, was up for sale. The catalog contained the rights to nearly 4,000 songs, including over 250 of the Beatles' compositions. Lennon and McCartney had sold their copyrights to a publisher in 1963, a decision they later regretted. As songwriters, they still collect 50% of royalties on their music, or 25% each, but the other half went to the publisher. McCartney had tried to buy ATV in 1981 and urged Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono, to join him in a bid. When Ono declined, McCartney refused to pay the $40 million asking price. So, in a nutshell, that's how MJ ended up acquiring the rights to Come Together. And if you're wondering how Paul McCartney felt about MJ owning the Beatles publishing,
Congratulations! Oh my God.
he wasn't exactly thrilled. On one hand, I think he understood that this was the entertainment industry. A move like that was an incredible business opportunity, and one he simply didn't jump on when he had the chance. But on the other hand, I'm sure he felt hurt by a friend and frustrated by the way the Beatles songs were being used, especially in commercials. He worried it would tarnish their music's reputation or devalue their legacy by associating it with products or even with politics he didn't agree with.
The trouble is that we never did do commercials with the Beatles. We had lots of big offers from soft drinks companies, to do stuff, obviously, but we always thought, no, it kind of spoils it. Just takes that little edge off it that people who like Beatles stuff kind of go, nowhere, man, and revolution. They kind of feel something for it, And that was what we tried to do. That's what we were all about, was trying to resist all those commercial offers. Now, if somebody else wanted to do it, then fine, it's fine. But that's what's happening now, is our songs are tending to get a little bit commercialized now, which I'm not too wild on, because it kind of spoils them a little bit for me.
I do think that stance may have softened over time, but the truth is, I don't think he and MJ ever fully repaired their friendship. To again quote Making Michael by Mike Smallcombe. After learning that Michael had acquired the songs, which he called his babies, McCartney felt betrayed by his one-time friend and collaborator. McCartney was especially hurt that Michael had not contacted him to forewarn him of his plan. I think it's dodgy to do things like that, McCartney said. To be someone's friend and then buy the rug they're standing on? He later acknowledged that Michael informed him of his bid and the purchase was carried out totally overboard, but their relationship never recovered. In the following years, McCartney tried several times to contact Michael about the possibility of buying the catalog from him, only to be stonewalled. He will not deal, McCartney said. It was on my advice that he bought it, the fact that he stepped into publishing at all, and I've got only myself to blame, really.
Oh my God, my Shayla, my Shayla.
I just did good business,
Now that we know Come Together's humble beginnings and the good business MJ did behind the scenes, we can finally talk about the song once it was in Michael's hands. Although Come Together didn't get an official album release until 1995's History, it was actually recorded about a decade earlier during the Bad album sessions in 1985. MJ recorded it at his Havenhurst studio with engineer Bill Bottrell. According to Bill's official Twitter account, he and MJ had discussed which Beatles songs he might try to cover, and Bill suggested Come Together. To quote the story of History by Pez Jax, that same year, while working on the Bad sessions late one night, Michael asked his longtime collaborator Bill Bottrell to drive him home. Over the years, many engineers had played chauffeur if Michael had chosen to work late. He'd send the driver home and ask a member of the studio crew to give him a ride. On the drive, the pair listened to a mixtape of Beatles songs that Michael had compiled. He asked Bottrell which song he thought they could create together. Bottrell suggested that Come Together could make for an exciting reimagining, and the pair agreed to explore the song at a future session. According to Michael, it was a few days after the conversation that when Bottrell, holed up at the Havenhurst studio, had compiled a demo instrumental with guitars and MIDI for him to come in and work with. To make the song better suited to Michael, Bottrell transposed the key 2 semitones from DM to EM and increased the speed from 83 beats per minute to 91 beats per minute, giving Michael more pace. This shift would benefit later during his live renditions of the song, allowing him to charge the stage with energy and flair, versus the original's acoustic approach. approach. The vocals followed in rapid succession with Michael acting on impulse. I just went in one take and started singing it. We kept it kind of raw and funky. It was just spontaneous, but I knew I wanted to do something with it. That song ended up not being selected for the Bad album. I think it could have been because MJ at the time had intended for Bad to be even bigger than Thriller and didn't want to have to include a cover song to accomplish that. So instead, the song was shelved. That is, until 1988's Moonwalker, to again quote The Story of History by Pez Jax. During the filming for Moonwalker, Michael told director Jerry Kramer that he had recorded a version of the Beatles Come Together and was considering including the song on his planned greatest hits package. This would be Decade, an unreleased greatest hits compilation that later turned into MJ's next studio album, Dangerous. At first, Kramer reacted to the news with skepticism. I thought, he's messing with John Lennon, but when Michael allowed him to hear a cut of the song, Kramer's mind changed completely. Michael doesn't emulate John Lennon or the Beatles. It's an outstanding performance that shows the depth of his vocal talent. When I heard Michael sing Come Together, it blew me away. They agreed a live performance of Come Together would make the perfect close to the adventure movie, a showcase of Michael's unique talent as a live performer, but in a more intimate setting. For those who hadn't seen him on the Victory or Bad World tours, it offered them a taste of what an incredible performer he had become, and bookended the short with a full live performance at the open and the close. We set up the performing situation and he performed the song 4 or 5 times, the only times he's done it in public. It's a stunning performance and a moving song. After Moonwalker, the song kind of just drifted through the many Michael Jackson projects of the late 80s and early 90s. In 1989, its inclusion was considered for the animated film Strawberry Fields Forever, produced by Al Brodax. When that failed to go anywhere, it was then considered for a physical release on the Days of Thunder soundtrack in 1990. MJ's reasoning for not including it, I believe, was due to concerns about overexposure. At this point, he was at the peak of his career, and he reportedly felt that if the public saw too much of him, they might start to pull away. So the soundtrack was released without it. Of course, with the Decade Greatest Hits compilation eventually turning into Dangerous, Come Together was once again on the table for the album, but MJ ultimately felt it didn't fit the material. He did, however, release it as a B-side to Remember the Time in 1992.
Oh.
Which brings us to 1995's History, where Come Together finally found an official album home, on disc 2, sandwiched in between Money and You Are Not Alone.
Ariana, what are you doing here?
History to me is one of the most cohesive, vulnerable, and raw albums Michael Jackson ever created. I dare say, I believe it's his magnum opus. It's the one album I fully recommend to people if they actually want to understand who MJ was as a person and how he felt during that very specific, very turbulent time in his life. So for Come Together to just end up here, I kinda gotta side-eye it a little bit. So why was it even included on History? Let's hear Matt Forger, MJ's longtime studio engineer, explain why in MJCast episode 151, the Matt Forger special.
The album is very cohesive and very thematic in its approach, apart from a couple of songs which kind of feel like they fell onto the CD by accident from another album or something. So one of those is Come Together, which was a B-side that had already been released like 10 years earlier nearly. Do you remember what the logic was, or whether it was ever explained why there was a decision made to put Come Together in the middle of this album?
I remember Michael asking me that question. Michael said, come on in the studio, and he played the Come Together track. He cranked it up and we listened to it. He goes, is this good enough to put on the album? And I said, yeah, I think this is extremely well executed. This is as good of a Beatles cover as any Beatles cover I've ever heard. I mean, Michael really kind of gets to the core of it in his vocal performance. It's a fantastic vocal performance. I think there might be the fact that he was viewing the potential message of the song Come Together, kind of like John Lennon's Imagine. Well, why can't we come together? There's obviously another interpretation of John Lennon's version of Come Together that I know Michael did not intend. I was basing my reaction when he asked me the question strictly on listening to the performance that I had just heard in the moment in terms of, Michael's vocal performance and work that Billy did on the track. And I said, yeah, this is good enough. Absolutely. The quality is there.
So ultimately, Come Together was included because of its messaging, but when you actually listen to the lyrics, they kinda just sound like gibberish. I mean, what the hell is a spinal cracker? Maybe it's not a song that's meant to be understood, but rather experienced. And through all the nonsense and word salad, one message still rings true. We must all be unified. We must all be free and come together right now. And honestly, when you consider the amount of cryptic, layered messaging across the History album, this song actually feels like a decent fit. Plus, the sequencing with Come Together placed right after Money but before You Are Not Alone might actually hammer in a deeper narrative that wealth, greed, and power are the very things driving us apart. But if we fought the good fight together, maybe we wouldn't feel so alone.
Someone cooked here.
Now, let's finally answer the question, why was Come Together the only Beatles song Michael Jackson ever recorded? It's been widely circulated that MJ was also planning to record a version of Strawberry Fields Forever, but apparently that rumor was debunked by Brad Sundberg during his In the Studio with MJ seminars. Personally, I think MJ was drawn to Come Together because it was his way of reclaiming a piece of black culture that had been whitewashed, a Chuck Berry-inspired rock anthem that passed through Lennon's pen and came back home through Michael's voice. To quote The Story of History by Pez Jax, given his status as one of the most prominent artists in the world at the time, Michael's rendition of Come Together made an unintentional gesture of taking back the original creation that had started with Chuck Berry, just as Ike and Tina had when they released a cover of Come Together mere months after the Beatles. It was a showing of black artists taking back what was rightfully their inspiration. There had been a long history of white artists taking the sounds and ideas from black musicians and using them in the mainstream, where they were given a bigger platform and were deemed socially acceptable. Michael was aware of this and reminded himself by handwriting, "If I can only find a white man with a black man's sound, I can make $1 million on a statue of Elvis at Neverland." It was his take on the famous quote from Sam Phillips of Sun Records, "If I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion." Though it's not viewed as such in the literal sense, Michael's cover is symbolic of taking back the artistry borrowed by white artists in successful positions. The 10-year journey it took for Come Together to finally see the light of day was a turbulent one, full of detours, delays, and decisions. But in the end, for MJ to be able to give this one piece of history back to Chuck Berry and to black culture as a whole, I truly believe made it all worth it.
Throughout the years, black artists have been taken advantage of. And it's time now that we have to put a stop to this incredible injustice. And like Sharpton was saying, people from James Brown to Sammy Davis Jr., some of the real pioneers that inspired me to be the entertainer that I am. These artists are always on tour because if they stopped touring, they would totally go broken. And it's been, the record companies really, really do conspire against their artists. They steal, they cheat, they do whatever they can, especially the black artists. I really believe it's a conspiracy because the story always ends the same. We pioneer, we innovate. At the end of the story, it's not an accident. It's happened on purpose. So we have to put an end to it forever.
I just want to say thank you for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like and validate a sister in the comments. Let me know if you like Michael's rendition of Come Together, or feel like he should have covered a different song from the Beatles catalog. All source material is in the description to keep up with updates when videos come out, or to keep up with updates on yours truly, darling. Follow me on my socials, Elon's app, aka the artist previously known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at _Hannah Savage. You can also check the community tab on my channel for updates as well. I'm still very much so gagging at the fact that the channel is approaching 10,000 subscribers, and I can't believe so many people want to hear a Savage talk about the hee-hee man. So just thank you so much for your endless patience and support. I appreciate it more than you guys could ever know. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.